Hi everyone, my name is Kayla. Welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf, where we talk about books. Today, I wanted to share some tips or tricks to help improve your reading experience. Now, these are just things that I've figured out over the years or I've learned from other people that have just helped my reading experience overall. They haven't necessarily impacted my reading speed, but just the ability to maintain a good reading experience and a steady pace at reading. Now, these tips are things that I've either figured out through trial and error on my own or I've learned through others and friends. You may have even seen these in other videos. I just wanted to put together my own take on this and hopefully help some of you improve your own reading experience. Now, I will say that it took time for me to figure out what worked best for me to improve my own reading experience. So definitely take all of these with a grain of salt. Figure out what works for you and play around with them, because the only way to figure out how to improve your own reading experience is through trial and error. Without further ado, let's start with the first one, which is read at your own pace and don't compare yourself to other people. Especially watching BookTube, it can be daunting and sometimes admirable to see so many people reading as much as they do. I think I've seen people read 20 books in a month. I personally cannot do that. I think I average about 4 to 6 books in a month, depending on how long they are. But don't compare your reading speed. What's important is you take the time to enjoy the book that you're reading. This is not a competition to get as many books in a month as you can. What's important is that you enjoy the book you're reading and that you actually are taking in the information that you're reading, because when you speed run a book, you might not remember everything you read. You might not remember details. You may not have enjoyed it as much as you could have because you missed certain details. Or you could end up lost and confused later on throughout the book. So definitely take your time with reading. Don't compare your pace to anyone else, and just read at the pace that feels comfortable for you. On to number 2 with try different formats. Now we have physical books, ebooks, there's audiobooks, and yes, I do consider audiobooks reading as you're still digesting the content. Now, I found that mixing up how I read with formats works really well for me. I know some people who can only do physical books. I know some people who only work well with ebooks, or they work well doing immersion reading, which is an audiobook with either physical or ebook. Try out different ways of reading. So if you are keen on physical books, but you find that you often don't get a chance to read physical because you forgot your book at home, then try ebooks. Give it a try because it's always with you. It's on your phone. You can just pick it up, open the app, and start reading if you forgot your physical copy. Audiobooks are also great because they let you read in situations you normally wouldn't. For example, I plug in an audiobook when I am cleaning, and normally I don't have a hand to sit down and read, but it lets me move forward and still enjoy the book while I'm cleaning, as it's more of a monotonous task. So try different combinations, see what works for you, what you enjoy more, and how much more you digest from the book, because that's also important. You want to be able to take the most out of the book, not just skim through the pages trying to meet a page count goal. Number 3 is try different genres. This is a tip that really helped me to keep out of a reading slump. I primarily read a lot of fantasy, but by introducing some sci-fi, historical fiction, some classics, and other genres, I've been able to avoid a reading slump for a very long time. The reason for this is that if you read just one genre, it's easy to get burnt out from that genre, to get frustrated with it, to get bored with it. By introducing new genres, trying them, and having that complete different tone in the book helps to keep you reading at a consistent rate. Now, what else helps in this is if you're not sure what genre you are wanting to try, just take a look at different books that catch your eye. Or something else that really helped me was, as I primarily read fantasy, I tried to think of things that might have commonalities in other genres. For example, with fantasy, there's a lot of mythical or magical creatures, and when I went over to classics, I was looking at books that had something similar. In this case, it ended up being books like Dracula or Frankenstein, for example. So find some similarities between the genres that you would typically read and try different books in a different genre. You might end up finding a new favorite, Plus, if you're not sure if you're going to like it, you can always use your local library to borrow the book. Number 4 is don't get lost in reviews. Now, reviews are very important. They help us filter out which books that we might best enjoy or which ones might not fit our tastes. But you can often get caught in other people's perspectives of a book affecting your own experience. One that's happened to me quite often is the overhype of a book. So there's a bunch of hype, everyone is rave reviewing about it, and my expectations got so high that no matter how good the book was, it could never meet those expectations just because of all of those rave reviews that I had read. Now, that is my own perspective, that's my own experience, and that's what I took away from those reviews. It's just something to remember in taking a grain of salt with those reviews. Fantastic, everyone's loving it, but try to temper your perspectives and your expectation of the book before you start it. Maybe give yourself some time in between reading all of those reviews and then picking up the book if that's what helps you temper that perspective going in. The opposite also works for if you've heard rant reviews about a book and it's prevented you from picking it up. Again, maybe time is what you need in order to pick it up in between that rant review, but you can again take it with a grain of salt and just try and temper your perspectives prior to going into it. Tip number 5 is figure out the tropes and the storytelling methods that you enjoy. Do you enjoy coming of age stories, rebellion, revenge, found family? And do you prefer reading about more mature characters or a younger character? What about the way the story builds? Do you like a bit of mystery? Do you like the world building spaced out throughout the book or info dumped all at once? These are all things to take into consideration, along with character-focused books or plot-focused books. These are all things to think about when you are reading, and figuring out what you enjoy will help you to find similar books that will hopefully be your next favorite. If not, it can at least help you with the next tip, and that is number 6 at DNF. This is one I still struggle with, but some tips that I've figured out are that you don't want it to be a hate read. If it's turning into a hate read or you're just flat out not enjoying any aspect of the book, it might be time to put it down. You can consider trying to pick it back up at a later point, but if it's a DNF and you're confident that you do not want to finish the book, just put it down at that point. You will be able to add some information to your filter at least on which kind of storytelling methods or tropes or different aspects of a book did not work for you, kind of in contrast to what we've talked about already. So don't be afraid to DNF a book. This will give you time to invest in a book that you might enjoy more, and it prevents you from having an unenjoyable read. The last tip here is number 7, with the number of books you read at once. This is something purely individual. I know people who can only focus on one book at a time, whereas others need multiples at a time while they're reading. So figure out if you have the better experience reading only one book at a time, or if you need to incorporate additional books while you're reading. So maybe you'll be reading 3 or 4. I think the most I've seen is 5 books at once. It's really individual. You need to kind of just play around with it and figure out what works best for you. Same with all of these tips. Play around with them, experiment, try different things, and see what works for you. Overall, this is about your reading experience, how to improve it, and how to get the most out of your enjoyment from reading. So that's the tips that I put together for you today. Try them out, try different ways of mixing them up. If there are other tips that you guys have heard of and I didn't include, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear your tips. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.